Stop. If you are still opening AI, typing one hopeful sentence, and waiting for a perfect answer, you are leaving most of the value on the table. Today we are building the beginner's guide to AI automation. The outcome is simple: teach the first automation map, trigger, data, AI step, review, output. This is not a list of random prompts. It is a practical workflow with inputs, rules, examples, and a review step. I will show the before state, build the system piece by piece, test it on a realistic example, and then give you the quality checks that keep it useful after the first try. The key idea is that AI should not be treated like a magic search box. Treat it like a junior operator with a clear job description. When the job is clear, the output gets clearer. When the input is messy, the workflow should make the mess visible instead of hiding it. The reason AI automation for beginners matters is not because people need one more shiny tool. It matters because real work usually fails in the handoff between intention and execution. You know what you want, but the details live in too many places: notes, emails, browser tabs, calendars, chats, documents, and memory. That scattered context creates three problems. First, you repeat yourself. Second, you make decisions with stale information. Third, you ask AI for help before you have given it enough context to be helpful. That is why the answer sounds confident but generic. So the workflow we build today starts before the prompt. It starts by naming the inputs. What does the assistant need to know? What should it ignore? What counts as a good result? What should be reviewed by a human before anything gets published, sent, bought, or automated? Those questions turn a weak AI interaction into a reusable operating system. Here is the before and after for this build. Before, the work looks like this: whiteboard map becomes working automation. After, we want a clean set of next actions, a short explanation for each action, and a simple way to know whether the output is safe to use. That before and after matters for two reasons. It helps you know whether the workflow actually worked, and it helps viewers stay oriented. If a video starts with theory, people leave. If it starts with a visible transformation, people understand why the next 16 minutes matter. For this workflow, the output must be usable in the real world. That means it should be specific, it should be short enough to act on, and it should include warnings when the AI is uncertain. We are not trying to make the assistant sound impressive. We are trying to make the next move obvious. Step 1 is the job description. Do not start with, "Help me with this." Start with the role, the goal, the available inputs, and the boundary. For this topic, the role is not general assistant. The role is workflow operator. The goal is, teach the first automation map, trigger, data, AI step, review, output. The available inputs might include notes, links, transcripts, tool lists, examples, deadlines, constraints, budget, and your preferred output format. The boundary is what the assistant must not do. It must not invent facts. It must not pretend missing data exists. It must not recommend a tool only because it is popular. It must not turn a simple task into an overbuilt system. That boundary is important. AI becomes more useful when it knows when to stop. If the workflow needs a human decision, the output should say so. If the data is weak, the output should mark it. If there are multiple good paths, the output should compare them instead of pretending one path is always right. Step 2 is the scoring rule. A request asks for output. A scoring rule tells AI how to choose between possible outputs. That is where the workflow becomes repeatable. For the beginner's guide to AI automation, I want the assistant to score each option across clarity, effort, risk, and payoff. Clarity means the next action is easy to understand. Effort means the action is realistic for one person or a small team. Risk means there is a chance of wrong facts, bad assumptions, wasted time, or policy problems. Payoff means the action moves the user closer to the outcome. This is useful because AI will often give you too many ideas. A scoring rule turns a pile of ideas into a ranked list. It also makes the assistant explain itself. If an action has high payoff but high risk, you know it needs review. If an action is low effort but low payoff, it might be a warm-up task, not the main priority. Step 3 is the output template. This is where many people lose the system. They get one good answer, then the next answer comes back in a totally different structure. That makes it hard to compare results, improve the workflow, or turn the output into action. For this build, use 4 sections every time. First, a 3-sentence summary. Second, the next actions in order. Third, risks and assumptions. Fourth, questions that must be answered before the plan is final. That structure works because it separates confidence from uncertainty. The summary tells you what changed. The action list tells you what to do. The risk section tells you where to slow down. The questions tell you what is missing. If an AI output does not help you decide faster, it is not finished. A nice paragraph is not the same thing as an operational result. Step 4 is the messy test. Clean demos are easy. Real work is not clean. So before you trust this workflow, you should test it with missing data, conflicting goals, and a time limit. For example, give the assistant a rough note, a vague deadline, an incomplete list of constraints, and one priority that competes with another priority. Then ask it to produce the same output template. The important question is not whether the answer looks smart. The important question is whether it handles uncertainty honestly. If it invents details, that is a fail. If it gives 20 actions when you asked for 3, that is a fail. If it ignores constraints, that is a fail. If it asks 1 or 2 useful clarifying questions and still gives a practical first draft, that is a pass. This is how you protect yourself from confident but fragile automation. Here is the prompt structure I would use. Act as a practical AI workflow operator. Your job is to help me with the Beginner's Guide to AI Automation. Use the context below. Do not invent facts. If information is missing, mark it as missing. Give me a concise output I can act on today. Then add the task, teach the first automation map, trigger, data, AI step, review, output. Then add the rules. Limit the main recommendations to 3. Rank them by payoff and effort. Flag any assumption that could change the answer. Include a short quality control checklist at the end. Ask clarifying questions only when they materially improve the result. Then add the output format. Summary. Inputs used. Recommended actions. Risks. Questions. Next 15-minute move. That last line is powerful because it forces the plan to become behavior. A workflow that does not end in a next move is just more information. The reason this can keep working is that every run teaches the system. When you use the same input categories and the same output template, you can compare results. You can see which recommendations were useful, which ones were too broad, and which ones needed better context. After each use, add one note. What did the assistant miss? Maybe it ignored a budget. Maybe it misunderstood the audience. Maybe it gave a recommendation that was technically right but unrealistic. Put that feedback back into the rules. This is the quiet advantage of workflow thinking. You do not need a perfect prompt on day 1. You need a structure that improves. The first version gets you moving. The second version removes a mistake. The third version becomes something you can trust for a narrow job. That is how practical AI compounds. The first mistake is trying to automate a task you cannot explain manually. If you cannot describe the current process, the assistant has no stable pattern to follow. It will fill in the blanks, and those blanks are where bad systems are born. Before adding tools, write the manual version in plain language. When this input arrives, I check this thing. Then I decide between these options. Then I create this output. Then I review it for these risks. That one paragraph is more valuable than a complicated automation map. For AI automation for beginners, this matters because people often jump straight to software. They ask, what tool should I use, when the better question is, what decision am I trying to make repeatedly? Once the decision is clear, the tool choice becomes easier. Until then, more tools only create more places for work to hide. The second mistake is confusing speed with quality. AI can draft quickly. That does not mean everything should move quickly. The workflow should speed up gathering, sorting, drafting, and formatting. It should not remove judgment from decisions that affect money, customers, health, legal issues, privacy, or reputation. So build a two-speed system. Draft fast. Review deliberately. For low-risk internal notes, you can move quickly. For public content, client communication, financial choices, or anything with real consequences, slow down and check. This is also better for audience trust. Viewers can tell when a channel is pushing generic automated content. The advantage of this channel is proof-first execution. Show the build. Show the test. Show the limitation. That is more durable than pretending every AI output is perfect. Now measure the workflow. There are 4 simple metrics. First, minutes saved. Did the system reduce the time from input to usable output? Second, edits needed. Did the output require small edits or a full rewrite? Third, decisions made. Did it help you choose a next action? Fourth, reuse value. Would you run it again next week? These metrics prevent tool collecting. A tool that feels exciting but does not save time, improve decisions, or reduce mistakes is not part of the core system. It is entertainment. That is fine, but do not build your work around it. For this channel, every workflow should earn its place. If it saves time but creates risk, add a review step. If it produces good ideas but weak actions, add a scoring rule. If it works once but not twice, improve the template. That is how the system gets sharper. Here is your first 15-minute move. Pick one recurring task related to AI automation for beginners. Do not pick the biggest task in your life. Pick something that happens often enough to matter and small enough to test today. Collect 3 real examples of that task. Then write the job description, the scoring rule, and the output template. Run the workflow once. Review it. Fix one rule. Run it again. That is enough for day 1. The goal is not to build a giant system immediately. The goal is to prove that one narrow workflow can create a reliable before and after. Once one workflow works, you can connect it to another. Research connects to planning. Planning connects to drafting. Drafting connects to review. Review connects to publishing or execution. That chain is where the real leverage appears. Before using the output, run this quality control checklist. Are the facts checkable? Are assumptions clearly marked? Are the risks visible? Is the recommendation specific enough to act on? Is the next action something you can do in 15 minutes? Did the assistant stay inside the boundary you gave it? If the answer is no, do not throw away the whole workflow. Fix the rule that failed. If the output was too broad, add a limit. If it invented facts, add a source requirement. If it ignored constraints, move the constraints closer to the top of the prompt. If it gave too many ideas, force a ranked top 3. This is the real skill, not writing clever prompts, but debugging systems. Once you learn to debug the workflow, you can apply the same method to almost any practical AI task. The payoff of this build is not that you used AI. Nobody gets points for using AI. The payoff is that you made a useful decision faster, created a better draft, reduced a repeated mistake, or turned scattered context into a reusable asset. That is why this channel is built around workflows instead of hype. Tools change. Interfaces change. Model names change. But the pattern stays useful. Define the job, gather the inputs, set the rules, produce a structured output, review the result, and improve the system with feedback. If you remember only one thing from this video, remember this: a good AI workflow makes the next human action easier. If it does not do that, simplify it. If it does, save it, reuse it, and improve it next week. Quick recap. We started with the problem: scattered context and one-line prompts create generic output. Then we built a workflow around a job description, scoring rules, a stable output template, messy testing, and a quality control checklist. That is how the beginner's guide to AI automation becomes practical instead of theoretical. Now here is the next step. Save this workflow and run it on one real task today. Then write down what failed. The failure is not a problem. It is the data that improves the next version. Subscribe to AI Workflow Lab, because the next build connects these individual workflows into a weekly review system. That is where you stop collecting prompts and start operating with a real AI-supported command center. Additional implementation pass. For the beginner's guide to AI automation, the safest way to improve the workflow is to run it 3 times with 3 different examples. The first example should be easy, so you can confirm the structure works. The second example should be messy, so you can find weak rules. The third example should include a constraint, such as a deadline, a budget, a specific audience, or a quality standard. After those 3 runs, compare the outputs. Keep the lines that helped you make a decision. Delete the lines that sounded good but did not change your next action. Add one rule that prevents the most common failure. This is how the system becomes sharper without getting bigger. Additional implementation pass. For the beginner's guide to AI automation, the safest way to improve the workflow is to run it 3 times with 3 different examples. The first example should be easy, so you can confirm the structure works. The second example should be messy, so you can find weak rules. The third example should include a constraint, such as a deadline, a budget, a specific audience, or a quality standard. After those 3 runs, compare the outputs. Keep the lines that helped you make a decision. Delete the lines that sounded good but did not change your next action. Add one rule that prevents the most common failure. This is how the system becomes sharper without getting bigger.